Good morning and welcome to the Developing Partnerships for Effective Program Outcomes webinar, hosted here by the Office of Illinois Works at DCEO. We thank you for taking the time to join us today. We know we're all busy, but thank you again for joining us. Over the next 2 hours, you'll have an opportunity to explore the potential impact of partnerships on your Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship Program and outcomes. My name is Norman Ruano, and I'm the Deputy Director of Illinois Works here at DCEO, and with me today is Dr. Gia Suggs from Northern Illinois University. She will be the co-facilitator, and I'll be the facilitator today. Gia, if you could please say hi to the attendees today.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Great, thank you, Gia. Illinois Works was created as a result of Governor Pritzker's historic $45 billion capital plan and his particular commitment to expanding equity in the Illinois construction workforce. Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO, the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO requires a comprehensive set of expectations that includes multiple program elements. Applicants may have expertise in one or several of the program requirements, but may perhaps not have capacity to deliver them all. Organizations can create bridges and close those gaps by creating partnerships. Partnerships are formal arrangements by two or more parties. During this course, you'll be provided with information, resources, and support to help you successfully develop partnerships that will allow you to provide the array of programs and services our pre-apprentices need in order to meet the Illinois Works NOFO criteria and create a very strong program proposal. So we encourage you, as you participate in this course, to really pay close attention to the various things we're going to be discussing and to see how this may be an opportunity for you to create a stronger proposal as you put together your proposal for the Illinois Works NOFO. At the end of this course, you'll be able to describe the relationship between DCEO and Illinois Works, describe the 3 key programs implemented as a result of the Illinois Works Job Programs Act, access information available from the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO 2021 website, explain how GATA impacts potential partnerships, assess your program's capabilities against the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship Program elements, determine the types of partnerships that might strengthen your program, remove barriers to cultivating high-impact partnerships, and access Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO resources. One key thing that I want to mention as we start to get going through the course, some of you have already participated in some of the other webinars that we have delivered, and if you have, some of the content that we're going to present at first may be a review for you, but there are some individuals that register that have not participated before, so we want to make sure that we provide some context to them and some introduction about Illinois Works and DCEO before we get going and discussing the particular content that we have created for you today related to partnerships. Please notice that this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available to all of you and the public in the next 24 to 48 hours through our DCEO NOFO website. Gia will provide for you the link in the chat where you can access, again, the our NOFO landing website in case you do not have that information. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you do have questions, given the number of participants we have, you can unmute yourself or ask your questions through the chat, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. Again, do you have any questions before we proceed? If you don't have any questions, let's get going. As a matter of introduction, I just want to make sure that you're fully aware of the capabilities that WebEx has in the technology that we're using today. So at the end of this section, you'll be able to use the WebEx features and functions to fully participate in the training and also identify what you hope to learn from this training today. So let's familiarize ourselves with WebEx just to ensure that we're fully aware of the capabilities, and we want to make sure, as I mentioned, that you're fully engaged. This technology allows you to mute and unmute yourself, so you can mute and unmute yourself. You also have the opportunity to stop and start your own video. And then there's the chat feature where you could submit your questions. And then you also have a raise hand feature where you can raise your hand. So I'm going to practice here a little bit with raising your hand. If you could please tell me how many of you participated in the GATA pre-qualification webinar that was delivered a few weeks ago. Any of you participated? Okay, we have some people that said they participated. Anybody else that participated in that webinar? Well, not a lot of people participated in that webinar. We have a few. Great. Dominic participated. Great. Mark participated. Shashiwa participated. How about the Introduction to Illinois Works webinar? How many of you participated in that particular webinar? Okay, great. A lot of you participated in that webinar. Great. How about the Bidders Conference? How many of you participated in the Bidders Conference? Okay, great. So a lot of you participated in the Bidders Conference, but there's still a good 50% of the participants today that did not participate in any of those webinars. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to go through an introduction very quickly just to make sure that we're all on the same page before we proceed to the partnership content. To help us facilitate our experience today, please keep your line muted. We will certainly allow you an opportunity to unmute your line to ask questions or make comments. At the end of each section, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we will also, through other activities, allow you to ask questions or make comments. So it's very important that we keep those lines muted, but if you do want to ask a question, don't want to mute your line when we give an opportunity, go ahead and submit your question through the chat. We will try our best to address all your questions and comments as we possibly can with the time that we have, but we're not able to answer all questions or comments, or if you have other questions or comments, please email us to the address that you see on your screen right now, ceo.illinoisworks@illinois.gov, and we'll be more than happy to respond to your questions and comments through that means. Moving on, please using the chat, tell us your name, the organization or agency that you work with and your role there so that we have an idea of who we have with us today. Again, your name, organization or agency you're with, and the role that you have there. So we have Bonnie Logan with us today from North Lawndale Employment Network, Christine from DCO. We have Carolyn, Tiffany from Metropolitan Family Services. We have someone from Hacia, someone from Aspida, from the Cook County Partnership, Jeff from high school, from Rich Township High School. Great. Dominique from St. Paul Community Development Ministries. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you being here. And using the chat also, please tell us, what do you hope to learn today through this course? What are your expectations when it comes to learning? What is it that you hope to learn today? Anybody wants to share what they hope to learn today? Using the chat, please. How to create better partnerships. That's great. We will definitely address how to create better partnerships and how to deal with partnerships and barriers that you may be facing out there in creating partnerships. How to connect with registered apprenticeship programs. That's good. Proper way of creating partnerships for this grant. Great, we will certainly discuss that. Additional program partners and wraparound services. We will certainly discuss that too. Great, thank you very much for sharing. We appreciate the information provided. Any questions so far before we proceed on to the next section? Again, if you have questions, please enter them in the chat or unmute yourself. We also have someone saying placing participants. That is certainly something that we're going to be discussing extensively today. Okay, great. Moving on to the next section. As I mentioned earlier today, if you have already attended one of our webinars, this is going to be a review for you. But we want to make sure that participants that have not attended a webinar before have the context about Illinois Works. So we're going to spend a few minutes here giving you an introduction to Illinois Works. By the end of this section, you'll be able to articulate the mission of DCO, describe the relationship between DCO and Illinois Works, and describe the 3 key programs being implemented as a result of the Illinois Works Jobs Program Act. As I mentioned earlier, Illinois Works is a top priority of the governor's 5-year economic plan, and it's very important to keep that in mind as you continue in this webinar and you want to have an understanding of why this is being done. With new capital funding set to pave the way for tens of thousands of jobs over the next decade in the construction industry, the Illinois Works Job Programs Act was intentionally designed to increase equity. Very important to increase equity and opportunity in capital construction jobs for underserved groups, including people of color, women, and veterans. So it's important to emphasize here that the Illinois Works programs are particularly focused on targeting people of color, women, and veterans. Those are our target populations. The intention is to reinvigorate the workforce in Illinois for the future. The Office of Illinois Works is housed in the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. In fact, it's a brand new bureau at DCO and was created as a result of Governor Pritzker's $45 billion capital plan and the commitment to expand equity. The mission of DCO is to deliver impactful and efficient programs and services to help keep and attract growing businesses and maintain a skilled workforce. Our programs enhance communities so that the climate is one in which small and large businesses, including their workforce, can succeed to the greatest extent possible. And Illinois Works is one of those DCO programs. The Illinois Works Jobs Program Act. This is very important. How did the Office of Illinois Works come officially into being? Unfortunately, data shows that for too long, the construction industry and the trades have not been accessible for diverse communities. In fact, fewer than 10% of apprenticeships are extended to women and minorities in some of the best paid trades in the construction industry. As a result, the Illinois Works Program Act is a statewide initiative to ensure that all Illinois residents have access to state capital projects and careers, including the construction industry and the trades. The goal is to provide contracting and employment opportunities to historically underrepresented populations in the construction industry. The effort specifically targets, again, women, people of color, and veterans. The Illinois Works in itself is a very innovative model of workforce development, and it has 3 key components as part of the model. First of all, it creates job demand in the construction industry. Second of all, it creates a talent pipeline. And third, it provides incentives for contractors and subcontractors to hire and retain graduates from our programs. Typically, workforce development models have 1, maybe 2 of those components. And a combination of those components can have a serious impact on the workforce. But Illinois Works has all of the components to create a comprehensive response in terms of workforce development at all levels. So Illinois Works is a one-of-a-kind initiative, and it's a very unique position to make a substantial difference here in Illinois. Now, When you think about workforce development, a key question that a lot of workforce development practitioners and professionals think about is what poses the greatest threat to a workforce development initiative, particularly one like Illinois Works that's very innovative. A lot of us that have done workforce development for decades would immediately think about funding. And it is true, funding is typically one of the biggest threats that any model, workforce development model, faces, the sustainability of funding through time. Illinois Works has solved this potential problem by providing a comprehensive funding mechanism. Illinois Works, in fact, is here to stay for a while. We are in a position to do something unique, innovative, and highly impactful in different communities throughout the state of Illinois. The data. It's very important, as I mentioned earlier, to recognize the fact that the construction industry has not been necessarily welcoming to women and minorities in the past. In fact, less than 10% of apprenticeships are extended to women and people of color, particularly in the best paid trades. And improving this percentage and taking advantage of these employment opportunities is very important because the construction industry is expected or is projected to grow 12% in the next 10 years. In fact, construction industry jobs and careers are fairly well paid. On average, an individual that is an apprentice and is enrolled in a DOL registered apprenticeship program makes on average $18 an hour. And for those that achieve journey worker status, the average wage is $32 an hour. So as you can see, these wages are very reasonable. The majority of these jobs come with benefits in other benefits for the individuals that participate. We also know from research that investments in job training in the construction industry result in significant long-term economic impact for the state. Research shows that impact totals $1.2 billion. In fact, the same research shows that for every dollar invested in construction job training, Illinois obtains $11 in social and economic returns. So in general, the construction industry not only is expected to grow, but it also pays well, and it produces a lot of significant positive impacts for the state and its residents. As a result, the Office of Illinois Works, located at DCO, with the support and partnership of communities building the building trades in the construction industry, will deliver 3 key programs: the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Initiative, the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship Program, and the Illinois Works Bid Credit Program. And we're going to be discussing each of these quickly here as a matter of introduction and context so that you know what these are, so that you can contextualize the know-how that's out there and also our conversation about partnerships. The first program that the Office of Illinois Works is implementing is the Illinois Works Apprenticeship Initiative. And this program is very important because it creates demand. It's the first piece in this puzzle of our workforce model. It creates demand in the construction industry. And how does it do it? It opens the door of opportunity into the construction industry and the trades. It applies to public works projects with an estimated cost of $500,000 or more, including both capital grants, loans, and direct capital contracts and awards. It ensures, and here's the key to how we create demand, it ensures that contractors and subcontractors comply with the goal of 10% of the actual or estimated labor hours of qualifying projects have to be done by apprentices. So typically, in a traditional project, apprentices would do about 2, maybe 3%, in some of the best case scenarios, 5% of the hours being done on that project. With Illinois Works, now these projects that qualify to comply with Illinois Works, apprentices have a goal of performing 10% of the hours of that project. So as you can see, that creates a higher demand for apprentices, and if there's a higher demand for apprentices, there is job opportunities for community members to come into the construction industry. State agencies that fund capital projects are accountable for ensuring compliance. In the state of Illinois, there's more than 10 state agencies the Department of Transportation, the Capitol Board, the EPA, the IEPA, all of these state agencies fund capital projects throughout the state, and it is their responsibility to ensure compliance with Illinois Works. And although it's the responsibility of the state agencies, the Office of Illinois Works, I have a team that proactively monitors each project to ensure that it complies. This is very important. It's not just the state agencies have to comply, it's that we in the Office of Illinois Works proactively track each project to ensure that they're complying. We presently are managing the compliance of over 1,200 projects throughout the state of Illinois worth $2 billion. And something important to emphasize here is that the majority of these projects are smaller projects in the scale of $1 to $1.5 million. And they are located throughout all communities in the state of Illinois. So even small contractors have an opportunity to be either the prime contractors or subcontractors executing those projects. The second program that the Office of Illinois Works is implementing is the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship Program. And that's the program in reference, and that's the reason why most of you are here today. The NOFA that was released relates specifically to this program. While the Illinois Works Initiative, Apprenticeship Initiative creates the demand for jobs, the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship Program creates the pipeline of diverse candidates to help respond to that demand. So there's this demand that we're creating through the first program we're implementing, and that demand can be filled through a variety of means, not just through our graduates. There are other pre-apprenticeship programs throughout the state that can actually transition students and take advantage also of those job opportunities. But we are creating a talent pipeline, which is the second piece in the puzzle here that you can see, in order to take advantage of a lot of those job opportunities. And this pre-apprenticeship program will deliver pre-apprenticeship skills training with a particular preference and focus on underrepresented populations, and as we have mentioned before, is people of color, women, and veterans. The program is also free to individuals that participate, and they will receive a stipend as they participate in training. At the same time, we're focused on ensuring that they receive all the necessary supportive services to help address any systemic barriers that have been in existence for entrance into the construction industry. We presently have an allocation of $25 million that were appropriated for this particular pre-apprenticeship program by the General Assembly. In the first round of funding, as you have noticed in the NOFO, we are issuing $10 million worth of grants. Our second funding round will release the rest of the funding, and then we will have subsequent funding rounds after that, pending obviously approval from the General Assembly. This is all state money. It is money. It's a program being funded by the state of Illinois completely. So, and it's being managed again by the Office of Illinois Works at DCEO. The third program being implemented is the Illinois Works Bid Credit Program. And the Illinois Bid Credit Program is the third piece of the puzzle here. How do we ensure on the one hand, we're creating a job demand through the pre-apprenticeship program, we're creating a talent pipeline, but how do we ensure that contractors hire and retain individuals that we train? That's where the bid credit program comes. The bid credit program is an incentive to ensure that contractors hire and retain our pre-apprenticeship program graduates. It incentivizes contractors to diversify their pool of employees by allowing contractors and subcontractors to earn bid credits to use toward bids for future public works projects contracted by the state or any state agency. Bid credits are earned by employing apprentices who have completed the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship Program on public works projects contracted by state agencies. So when a contractor contracts one of our graduates, they earn bid credits that they can deposit in our bid credit bank, and then they can withdraw those bid credits in the future when they want to bid on projects that are being funded by the state so that their bids are more competitive. It's a big incentive for them to hire our people because they can actually win state projects by making their bids a lot more competitive through the bid credits. Any questions? I don't know if you see any questions in the chat, Gia.
No, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay, great. With your partnership, when we achieve the Illinois Works goals, we will have provided a career pathway for residents in disadvantaged communities, provided eligible apprentices with the skills for lifelong job security, promoted construction as a viable job industry for women and minority communities, provided the construction industry with a consistent skilled workforce for generations to come, and created new partnerships between state agencies and community organizations. These are the overarching goals that we have at Illinois Works. And once we execute all these programs, this is what we will achieve. If you would like to get more information about Illinois Works, DCO, and our programs, you can access that information by going to our website, www.illinois.gov/DCEO. When you get there, you could click on About Us, and you're going to be able to see more information about DCEO and all the programs and all the bureaus that we have. One of those will be Illinois Works, and if you click on the Illinois Works link, it will take you to the Illinois Works Job Program Act website, where you'll be able to get all kinds of information about our programs. On the right top side of the web page, you'll be able to find links to the various Illinois Works programs and also contact information in case you want to communicate with us. So that's how you'll get to all of our information and more information about DCEO. We also have, as you have, probably some of you have already navigated, we have a landing page for the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO that was released. In that landing page, you're going to be able to find all the information related to the Pre-apprenticeship program and the NOFO itself. Some of the information included there is the program background, program design, funding information, submission details, award timeline, information sessions. Gia will be providing in the chat the link again for this landing page. Something very important to notice is that everything that you need to successfully respond to the NOFO is available to you on this website. Please make sure you pay attention to the yellow wording on top of the website as you try to download documents. You need to follow the process that is being outlined in the yellow section on top of the website. Okay, great. This was the introduction we wanted to do. We will now move on to the content specific to partnerships. Let me know if you have any questions before we move on to that content. I think it's very important that we get all your questions answered as we go through all of this information. Our next section is we're going to discuss the key program elements for this NOFO. And in terms of objectives, by the end of this section, you'll be able to describe the evaluation criteria for the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO application. You'll be able to identify the program elements under program requirements in the NOFO. And these are really the key elements that we're going to be grading applications on. And you're going to be able to complete a capabilities and partnership self-assessment of the program elements. Those are our objectives for this section. As most of you know, we released the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or the NOFO, for the apprenticeship program on August the 6th, 2021. Keep in mind, and it's very important that I emphasize this, that your proposals need to be in to us by 5 p.m. on October the 4th, 2021. Again, October the 4th, 2021, by 5 p.m. in about 3 weeks. Application materials are being submitted nowadays in a different way, whereas in the past you would have submitted some type of email. Now they're being submitted using a technology called Smartsheet, and there is a particular smart sheet that you have to use to submit your application. Gia will be providing the smart sheet link in the chat so that if you don't have it, you'll be able to access it like that. Now keep in mind it's already in the chat. Keep in mind that this link was also provided as part of the NOFO, so if you read the NOFO thoroughly, you'll be able to locate it there. The other thing that is important to mention is that the department is under no obligation to review applications that do not comply with the above requirements. If the application is not submitted on time, on the date and time specified, if it's not submitted using the smart sheet link and is not complete per the NOFO requirements, the department is in no obligation to review your application. Great. In terms of evaluation criteria, your application will be evaluated based on the following categories in their respective weights. You will notice applicant capacity is 25% of the grade that you can get at your application. Documentation of need is another 25%. Project quality integration is 30%, and cost effectiveness and return on investment is 20%. As you can notice from the table and the graph that we're providing, the applicant capacity and project quality and integration make up 55% of the evaluation criteria, which is the majority of the points that you can earn. Both of these criteria, and I want to emphasize this, both of these criteria are highly impacted by your ability to respond to the expectations, to the various components that we're expecting for your proposals to have. These include the following program elements. So on the following graph, you probably, if you were part of a previous webinar, you probably have seen this graph before. This graph here really shows the program elements that we're looking for. The program elements represent each of the requirements for a high-quality pre-apprenticeship program that can significantly increase apprenticeship opportunities for historically underrepresented populations. You will say, why so much? Well, because the task that we have is a complex one. And our task is to increase apprenticeship opportunities for historically underrepresented populations. That is, when they complete our pre-apprenticeship program, our goal is to transition them to DOL registered apprenticeship programs of their choice. If they want to become electricians, then transition them to those DOL registered apprenticeship programs, or they want to become carpenters, or they want to become painters, or laborers, or plumbers, to be able to transition them to those programs. And again, our populations include women, people of color, and veterans. For those of you who attended the Bidders Conference, this graphic will look familiar. Let's take a brief look at each or a few of the elements that may require some distinction and may lend themselves for partnerships. Some of these elements are complex and may require for you to develop partnerships. When considering partnerships, the first step is to identify your organization's capabilities. Very important. You have to identify your capabilities. Which of the program elements is your organization able to respond to at the highest levels? In order to do that, we're going to complete the capabilities and partnership self-assessment together. We will share through the file sharing tool, which you can see right now on your screen, the file transfer tool. We're going to share the document with you. So please download this document. Just click on the document, download it, save it somewhere on your desktop, and then open the document and keep it open because we're going to be using it as we proceed in this section of the training. So I'm going to give you a minute to download the document and save it. And again, once you save it somewhere on your desktop, open the document and keep it open so that you can complete it as we proceed step by step in the training.
So Norman, while the participants are downloading the capabilities and elements document, there's a question in the chat from Alfonso. He is asking, what is the target number of pre-apprenticeship participants per organization that can apply?
Target number of pre-apprenticeship participant organizations that apply. So if you look at the NOFO, particularly pay attention to the attachment, the planning tool in the back of the attachment shows that we're looking for a cohort-based model. So, ideally an organization will do one, if they have enough capability, they can do two cohorts a year. In each cohort, we're expecting to be no more than 25 participants. So if your organization can do two cohorts a year, then we're talking about 50 participants. If your organization can do 25 cohorts a year, we're talking about 25 participants. One cohort a year, we're talking about 25 participants. And we're expecting, and we mentioned this in the bidders conference, on average, we're expecting funding to be given at a rate of about $10,000 per participant. So if you're applying for two cohorts, then your application should be in the range of $500,000. If you're applying for one cohort, your application should be in the range of $250,000. I hope I answered your question, Alfonso. Okay, great. I hope all of you have been able to download the capabilities and partnership self-assessment. As I mentioned, we will use this document as we move forward. But one thing that is important to mention is as we review each of the program elements using the assessment, you need to assess your program's current capabilities using the following scale. 1 means no experience or expertise, so for a particular question on the assessment, if your organization has no experience or expertise, use a 1. If it has moderate experience and expertise, use a 2. If it has extensive experience and expertise, then use a 3. Any questions before we get started? Okay, great. So let's talk about wraparound supports. One of the things that we mentioned is a particular focus of our pre-apprenticeship program is to ensure that we reduce barriers for entrance for women, people of color, and veterans. And one of the key aspects of reducing those barriers is the provision of wraparound support services. Wraparound support services help pre-apprentices overcome barriers to participate. For example, life coaching, mentorship, financial literacy, alumni networking, childcare, transportation, fees, tools, uniforms, and other expenses that can create an obstacle to success. So we want to make sure that that programs are able to deliver wraparound services. So let's start with the first question on the assessment that you have in front of you. Does your organization have expertise and experience in providing these types of services? Please read the description and question number 1 of the assessment and respond with a 1, a 2, or a 3. Again, please read question number 1 and respond with a 1, a 2, or a 3. And it's important to mention that let's not overthink this. This exercise is intended as a snapshot of your current capabilities. It's not a perfect analysis, but it is intended to make you think about your capabilities and where you may need to develop partnerships. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next component that is also very important. Wraparound services is key. However, student support services and other instruction is also very important. Your program must assist participants with attaining academic success, certifications, and other relevant credentials. This is very important. If you have read the NOFO, you have noticed that we want to ensure that individuals, when they finish your program, walk out with relevant industry recognized certifications that they can use in the labor market. Does your program provide support for academic success, certifications, and other relevant credentials like tutoring services, retesting services, makeup sessions? These are all relevant student support services that can help students succeed. Now look at your assessment and please read and answer question number 2 on your assessment that is relevant to student support services. Again, question number 2, please answer 1, if you have no experience or expertise doing doing this. Number 2, if you have moderate experience and expertise. And 3, if you have extensive experience and expertise. At the same time, does your organization provide literacy, GED, or ESL classes free of charge? Why is this important? These services can be vital for students who do not qualify to register for your pre-apprenticeship program because they need to still obtain their high school diploma or their GED certificate in order to participate. Let's assume that your program doesn't offer GED or literacy or ESL classes, but you got someone in the community that is very motivated, that wants to participate, but they still need to be able to get their high school diploma or their GED. Is there someone you could partner with to do that? So let's answer question number 3 on the assessment. Please read the description of the question and respond to question number 3 that's related to those alternative services. And again, if you have no experience, give it a 1. If you have some moderate experience, give it a 2. If you have extensive experience, give it a 3. This is directly related. Question number 2 and 3 are directly related to student support services and other instructions. Someone in the chat mentioned that they were not able to download the assessment. We're putting, again, the file transfer on your screen. The only thing you got to do is click on the file and then press download, and that will open the opportunity for you to save it in your desktop. Once you have it saved on your desktop, open it and keep it open so that you can respond, you can answer as we go along. Okay, great. Do we have any other questions, Gia?
No, there are no other questions.
Okay, very good. Recruitment and outreach is one of the most important elements of this NOFO. And one of the reasons why it's so important is because the populations that we're serving, women, people of color, and veterans, a lot of times are missed by traditional marketing and recruitment strategies. It's very, very important that programs have access and experience in facilitating outreach and recruiting underrepresented populations. Your program must provide services like your program also must provide services like work-based learning that can respond to specific needs of these populations, and reaching out to contractors, local housing agencies, and other organizations will be key to secure job sites. So outreach, recruitment is key to recruit your populations into the program, but outreach is also important to outreach to organizations and other agencies that may be able to support your efforts. Does your program have access to underrepresented populations, specifically women, people of color, and or veterans? Please read question number 4 on the assessment and respond with a 1, a 2, or a 3. Great. Does your program have expert knowledge and proven prior outcomes relevant to working with your targeted populations? Let's assume that you're trying to target African Americans, or you're trying to target Latinos, or you're trying to target Asians, or you're trying to target women, or you're trying to target veterans. Does your program have expert knowledge and proven prior outcomes relevant to working with the target populations you're trying to target? Read question number 5 and respond to that question, please. Finally, do you have specific experience with marketing, conducting outreach, and providing accommodations for the specific target audiences that you're going to work with? Please read question number 6 and respond to it. Okay, moving on to the next component that is also very important, learning, curriculum, and instruction. This is very, very important. The program requires that you provide at least 150 hours of teaching, learning, and real-world practice, job site instruction, and work-based learning. Students need to be led into obtaining a NAPTU, NCCER, OSHA, First Aid CPR, or other relevant construction industry certificates and certifications. Can your program provide at least 150 hours of teaching, learning, real-world practice, and job site instruction? Please read the description and respond to question number 7 on the assessment. Can your program lead students to obtain NAPTU, NCCER, OSHA, First Aid CPR, or other relevant construction industry certificates and certifications? Please read question number 8 and respond to question number 8 with a 1, a 2, or a 3. Remember, a 1 is where you have no experience or capability. A 2 is where you have moderate experience or capability. And a 3 is where you have extensive experience and capability. Does your program have extensive experience using innovative tools, including online learning and virtual learning, particularly given the limitations resulting from COVID? Read the question number 9 and respond to question number 9. I mean, do you know the difference between synchronous and synchronous instruction? Do you have the capability? Can your instructors deliver, synchronous instruction, and what is that? Can your program do that, or do you need to develop partnerships in order to do that? But it's very important now that we're dealing with COVID to have those capabilities because we have to get very creative on ensuring that these students and participants are getting the skills that they need. Is our organization able to provide services like work-based learning? Please read the description and respond to question number 10 on the assessment. Great. Now let's discuss another component or some other components that are very important. That is career, employment, and transition services. So the Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship Program is not just a training program. It is truly a program designed to transition individuals into DOL registered apprenticeship programs, into employment in the construction industry. And this is where the rubber meets the road, the ability to transition those students that went through your program to successfully transition them to the apprenticeship program of their choice. Your program must have connections and relationships with employers, DOL registered union-based, company-based, or other apprenticeship programs, construction education or other employment, as well as experience in transitioning students to these resources. In addition, you're expected to leverage other resources by utilizing funding from other partner organizations and sharing curricula, standards, and best practices, along with providing additional funds for supportive services. Does your program have the experience, connections, and relationships to help transition participants to DOL registered union-based, company-based, or other apprenticeship programs, construction education, or other employment? Is very, very important. The Illinois Works funding formula, as I said, we're expecting to release funding at about $10,000 per participant, but we're expecting also for you to have the infrastructure and to have the resources in order to not only provide all of the other services we discussed, but in particular to ensure that career, employment, and transition services are provided, and they're provided at a high level. Please read the description and respond to question number 11, which is directly related to this, on the assessment. Does your program have a dedicated person who will be accountable for transitional services? Do you presently have someone? Are you planning to have a dedicated person to do transitional services? Those are the expectations that we have. Read the description and respond to question number 12 on the capabilities in partnership self-assessment, which talks about a dedicated person. Is your program able to utilize funding from other partner organizations and share curricula, standards, and best practices, along with providing additional funds for supportive services? Please read question number 13 and respond to that. And again, the scale that you're using is 1, if you have no experience or capability, 2, if you have moderate experience and capability, and 3, if you have extensive experience and capability. Any questions? Gia, do you see any other questions in the chat?
No, there are no additional questions in the chat.
Great, thank you. Additional dedicated personnel. It's also very important that we, have additional dedicated personnel. It's our goal. Our goal is to significantly increase apprenticeship opportunities for historically underrepresented populations. And this will be evaluated not only by DCO and the Office of Illinois, but will also be evaluated by the Illinois Works Review Panel, which is a panel of individuals that have been appointed by the governor's office, elected officials, and other community members that are watching closely the performance of Illinois Works. And also, we need to report it to the General Assembly. We have to report our activities and our performance every year to the General Assembly to justify the funding and the practices that we're following. Given that this program will be required to successfully transition participants, collect and track data and outcomes, and successfully manage partnerships, it's very, very important. Does your program have dedicated staff to successfully manage partnerships? Please read question number 14 and respond to question number 14. Does your program have a dedicated staff person who will be accountable for data collection and analysis? Please read question number 15 and respond to question number 15. Now, question number 15 is the last question on the assessment. By now, you should have responded to all the questions with a 1 or a 3. I want to make sure that I give you a minute, so in case you're a little behind, you can complete the assessment. Okay, great. As you can imagine, all of these elements that we outlined and are right now circled in red are part of the heart and the focus of this NOFO. You notice also on the graph that says stipends. Stipends are also part of the wraparound services that we're providing. We specifically highlighted those because we want to make sure that you understand that if you're going to submit a proposal, you have to submit a stipend model based on the guidelines that we provided on the NOFO. But this is the core of, in the heart of this NOFO. A detailed description of expectations for each of these elements starts on page 8 of the NOFO under program description and program requirements, and it ends a few pages later. I truly encourage you to go to the NOFO, read those pages starting on page 8, a few pages down. We provide all of the information related to each of these elements that we are expecting in these proposals. Now, using the chat, and that's if you're interested in sharing, identify 3 to 5 elements that emerge as capabilities in your program. And again, capabilities are those that you score with a rating of 3 on the assessment. So if you're interested in sharing, if you're able to share, please include in the chat some of the areas that emerge as capabilities for your programs, which are those that you rated with a 3. there's a question in the chat, Gia. It says, are you referring to full-time dedicated staff for this program exclusively? Well, one thing I can tell you, depending on the size of your program, if your program is going to serve 50 individuals, and then assuming the majority of those individuals, huge majority of those individuals need to be transitioned, you probably will need a transitional and a career person to do that work, a full-time person. I'm going to be full-time or part-time. What I can tell you is that we do need to make sure that you have people that are dedicated to performing these tasks for Illinois Works. We need to make sure that these services are being provided. And as I mentioned earlier, the funding that we're providing, we feel is generous enough to ensure that you have the capacity to provide these services. So again, any areas that emerged as, capabilities, we have Tiffany here sharing equity, focus, recruitment, outreach. Anybody else that would like to share? As I said, it's not necessary that you share, but student support services, curriculum and instruction and learning, someone else is saying that those are areas of strength. That's great. Thanks for sharing, Mark. Anybody else that would like to share? Someone is saying that this is great information. Great. We certainly appreciate the feedback. You have an opportunity to do an evaluation about the webinar at the end, but we certainly appreciate the information. So those are your capabilities, areas that you score with a 3. Now, your areas of need are those areas that you scored with a 1. Once you have identified your program's capabilities, the next step is to identify areas where a partnership might complement your program to create a portfolio of services that covers each of the elements we just discussed. So, in the chat, if you want to share, you don't have to again, but if you're interested in sharing, what are some of the areas that you consider, because you scored it with a 1 on your assessment, areas of need? And again, we understand that the requirements of Illinois Works are expensive, so there may be a possibility that organizations may need some assistance in delivering some of this. Someone mentioned delivery of other instruction. Very good. That may be an area of need. Maybe you don't do GED instruction or literacy or ESL, and you may need to partner with someone to connect individuals that would like to participate in your program, but they cannot because they still do not have a GED certificate or a high school diploma, right? Anybody else would like to share an area of need? Anything that you score with a 1, it's an area of need. Curriculum and instruction, that is very good. It's a possibility that you're not able to deliver, NCCER or NAPTU curriculum. You got to remember, all of these types of instruction require that you have a construction laboratory. Do you have a construction laboratory with tools, with extraction systems, with, the safety measures in order for this to be successful, with the materials, it's going to be a lot of noise, Do you have those capabilities, or do you need to be able, or are you going to have to partner with someone? Work-based learning and practicums was highlighted by someone else. That is true. We expect for individuals to be able, once they're in the classroom, to be able to do go and practice with some at a job site, maybe a Habitat for Humanity site where they can help remodel someone's apartment or someone's house, maybe a public agency that does affordable housing, and they're remodeling apartments for the elderly or for the homeless. Those are all great opportunities for hands-on instruction, and we expect for these programs to have that. Someone else is mentioning that Osha Training. Well, That's another very important area because OSHA training can only be delivered by OSHA certified instructors. And there are very particular guidelines that have to be followed in order for students to secure those OSHA certifications. If the guidelines are not followed, the students cannot secure the OSHA certifications. And obviously, it's our expectation that they will. So that's another area for improvement that someone else mentioned. Now, how about an area where you didn't score out of 3? A 3 means you have full capability. A 1 means it's an area of need. Well, how about areas where you score borderline, where you scored it with a 2? Well, those could be areas where you're like, well, you know, we could potentially develop that capacity and we don't need a partnership. Or you're like, no, you know, if we go through a partnership, it'll be better so that you don't have to go through the process of developing that capacity yourself, right? So borderline areas are areas that you score with a 2. This will allow you to really think this through and say, well, you know, do I want to develop that capacity or is it easier to partner with such and such organization? So programs that you score with a 2 in your assessment, your team will need to decide if this is an area where the capacity can be developed or if a partnership will be more appropriate. And you obviously have to do that before you submit your proposal, because at the end of the day, the reason why we're having this webinar, this technical assistance for you, is for you to think this through, develop the strongest proposal that you can. As you can see from the NOFO landing page, is our interest to create a network of 20 to 25 providers throughout the state of Illinois. And if you want to be one of those providers in the network, make sure you put together the best possible proposal, maybe if need be, with partnerships to ensure that you cover all the bases and that you have the ability to deliver with partnerships all the required elements. Now, let's take a few minutes to complete the potential partner column on the assessment document. You will notice that the assessment document has first the questions, then the ratings for the capacity, and then the third column is potential partners. Take a few minutes to fill out that particular column now, based on just identify those individual areas that you score with a 1, or even potentially with a 2 that you think that you're going to need partnerships for, and identify and mention there, do some brainstorming of who the potential partners could be for you to address those areas with a 1 or potentially with a 2. So take a few minutes to do that. Now, we're not going to ask you to share it, but it's important for you to really think this through and say, well, you know, with these 3, 4, 5 areas, I really think I may need some partnerships. And here are the potential partnerships that I can work with. And if that's the case, and if you do decide, your organization decides to go that route, you may want to start reaching out to those partnerships. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about memos of understanding, but it's important that that work is done so that by the time you submit your proposal, everything is ready to go. Great. So we gave you a few minutes there related to completing the potential partner column. Once you have identified areas that might benefit from a partnership, it's time to identify the type of partnership that will be appropriate for each relationship. There are different types of partnerships. There are different types of relationships. We are going to cover different types of relationships in the next section of the webinar. Before we proceed to the next section of the webinar, are there any questions or comments? Gia, do you see any other questions or comments?
No other questions or comments in the chat.
Great. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself or submit them in the chat, and we'll be more than happy to address them. We want to make sure we're able to address any issues that come up or any questions that you may have. Make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, great. Moving on. Section 5 deals with developing partnerships. By the end of this section, you'll be able to describe the role of partnerships. You'll also be able to identify different types of relationships and brainstorm potential partners, and at the same time, create a memorandum of understanding. This is all very important as you think about developing partnerships and how to deal with those in order to make your proposal stronger. Types of partnerships. Once you have identified your program's capabilities and the opportunities for partnerships, the next step is to identify the type of partnership that will be appropriate for each relationship. Partnerships allow you to coordinate program activities for each of the program elements. They can respond to the needs of your pre-apprenticeship program. Now, one key thing to mention is that the NOFO already mentions very strongly the need for partnerships. The Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO requires that you develop partnerships. In addition to ensuring that programs have all the program elements, your program must also coordinate with local workforce areas, local and regional apprenticeship navigators and intermediaries, focus on the construction industry and the trades, union groups, community colleges, employers, employer associations, community-based organizations, and secondary schools. It is an expectation that pre-apprenticeship program graduates transition successfully into DOL registered apprenticeship programs. What's important to emphasize here is that without partnerships, these transitions are not going to be possible. You're going to have to partner successfully with the trades. You're going to have to partner successfully with employers. You're going to have to partner successfully with some public entities or community-based organizations to ensure some of these elements are done. It's just part of what it takes in order to execute these types of programs. Now, partnerships are formal arrangements by two or more parties. Strategic partnerships are formal agreements between two or more parties who share or exchange complementary resources, intellectual capital, and/or services to achieve a joint goal. A lot of times, organizations will get together and say, we're going to go in as strategic partners in this application. One is going to be the lead applicant and the other one is going to be a sub-grantee. Important, it's to determine that quickly because that's going to impact the way you write your application. There's also the possibility of doing cross-section partnerships, and cross-section partnerships are often used to describe activities involving representatives from multiple sectors working in new ways to address complex social and economic challenges. I'll give you an example of a cross-section partnership. For instance, a social service agency partners with a community college and also partner with employers and also partner with the unions. That's a cross-sectional partnership. It's all kinds of sectors coming together to address the particular situation you're trying to address. Some of the most effective partnerships out there are cross-sectional partnerships that address a variety of things. It's very difficult for one organization to be able to do it all. There are organizations that are very good at doing what they do, but they may not be able to address it all. If you're a college, you may be very good at instruction and ensuring that people receive student support service and ensuring that they get certifications, but maybe you may need assistance with recruiting populations from the particular community, or you may need assistance with placing people or transitioning people into these DOL registered apprenticeship programs and jobs. So, cross-sectional partnerships can make a big difference. The Illinois Works Pre-apprenticeship NOFO acknowledges the following roles: partners and providers. According to the NOFO, partners are typically formally structured long-term relationships, entities that work together with you to address complex issues to achieve a shared goal. You and your partners both contribute your unique capabilities to the relationship to maximize the outcomes. Now, for providers, it's not necessary that providers contribute to solving complex issues or even that they have joint strategic goals. Providers can contribute by effectively delivering a needed service. They can be an extension of your program service team. An effective provider contributes services, activities, and tasks that support your program's outcomes per their commitment. Their role is simply to get their job done. An example of a provider would be an instructor. You hired an instructor to do the Osha training. You hired an instructor to deliver NCCER training. You hired an instructor to do Osha, certification or first aid CPR certification. So there's a difference there between a partner and a provider. However, both partners and providers can provide critical support to your program's success. Any questions about this before we move on to the very specific details about what's required for partners and providers? As I mentioned, contracting an instructor for a program is typically counts as a vendor. They are more a vendor, a provider for your program, and not so much a partner. Partners are typically those where, organizations are coming together to do pieces of this service in order to ensure that you have a comprehensive program. So let's say a community-based organization providing wraparound services, or helping with the recruitment for the students, or helping with the placement or the transition services would be a partner, right? A provider is someone, buying the books from wherever you buy the books, that's a provider, right? Or an instructor will be a provider, or maybe a consultant is helping you design the curriculum, that will be a provider, right? Okay, great. So talking about the NOFO roles here. So in terms of partners, the partners could be the grantee, and a grantee could also be called a recipient, or a sub-grantee, or a sub-recipient. Those are typically the partners that we see. And then the providers can be a contractor or a vendor. So we're going to talk about each of these specifically just to make sure that we have clarity about what we're talking about. A grantee or recipient is a non-state entity that receives an award directly from a state agency to carry out the activities that's outlined in the award. So the grantee or the recipient is the one that applies, is the one that receives the money, is the one that is contracted by the state agency directly, okay? A sub-grantee or sub-recipient is a non-state entity that receives a sub-award for purpose of carrying out part or a portion of a state award. The sub-award creates an assistance relationship between the grantee and recipient and the sub-recipient. So as I said, when you apply, someone is going to have to be the grantee or the recipient. And if you have strategic partners, those will likely come in as sub-recipients or sub-grantees, and they have to be named on the proposal. A contractor or a vendor is a non-state entity that receives a contract to provide goods and or services for the awarding non-state entity. The contract creates a procurement relationship between the contractor and the grantee or recipient and or the sub-grantee or recipient, meaning, going back to the case of an instructor here is either a contractor or a vendor, someone that, the grantee decides, I'm going to use this vendor, this contractor to deliver, this or to do that. Those are not a sub-grantee or a sub-recipient. Those are contractors or vendors. It's very important to mention that a vendor may provide products or services but does not necessarily require a contract. If you're buying books from a vendor, you don't necessarily have to have a contract with the provider of the books, or if you're buying pencils, or if you're buying some other accessories. But in other cases, there may be a need to issue a contract. So if you're hiring a consultant, or if you're hiring a trainer, you're going to have a contract with them. Regardless if you use a contract or not, there is a procurement relationship there. You're procuring those services, and you need to make sure that you're following your organization's procurement guidelines. I think we have a couple of questions, Gia.
Yes, there's a question regarding being able to access this recording after the training. And I know we're going to provide more details toward the end, but I'm also just going to put that the link in the chat where it will be available in the next couple of days.
Correct. So as we mentioned at the beginning of at the start of the course today, we are going to be sharing the recording in the next 24 to 72 hours. The recording will be posted on the landing page. Gia just shared the link right now in the chat. In the same place in the landing page, in the bottom of the page, for where it says informational sessions, you're going to notice that this particular webinar is listed there, and it gave you the link for you to register. In the next 24 to 72 hours, that link to register is going to become the link to download the recording, and also the link to download the slides for this presentation. It says GATA, but this program will be available as well. Yes, it will be available in the next 24 to 72 hours. Okay, great. Moving forward. So here are some very important things to keep in mind when it comes to recipients or grantees, sub-recipients or sub-grantees, and providers, contractors, and vendors. There are some requirements that may be important for some of these as you're considering them for partnerships or to include them in your proposal. First of all, the recipient and grantee, they must be GATA pre-approved, pre-qualified. And I'll circle back to this one in a minute, but they must be GATA pre-qualified. Are officially on record for the grant and can receive the actual funds for the grant through the grant agreement with DCEO. Recipients or grantees require MOU if they're going to include sub-grantees. All recipients or grantees must be a nonprofit organization. They must also report participation and outcomes through the periodic performance report and the periodic financial report, plus other reporting requirements by Illinois Works, and must maintain program documentation for 3 to 5 years. Now, most state programs, and Illinois Works is one of them, you need to keep your records for 3 years. Federal funded programs are required to keep records for 5 years. So that's for the recipient or the grantee. That is the organization that is applying for the funding, that is receiving the funding and getting a grant for it. Now, if you develop the partnership with some other organization to strengthen your proposal, and they go as sub-grantees or sub-recipients, they are not required to get GATA pre-qualified. However, they must not be on the debarred list, suspended list, excluded parties list, nor the sanctions parties list. They cannot be in any list out there that prohibits them from receiving public funding, okay? They need to be officially on record for the grant and can receive the actual grant funds. They are required to have an MOU with the grantee. They can be a for-profit, they can also be a not-for-profit organization, and they must report program participation and outcomes through the grantee. They must maintain program documentation for 3 to 5 years. In the case of the state, again, it's 3 years, and this is going to be outlined in the grant agreement that the grantee will receive. And the services they provide are reported and managed by the grantee or the recipient, okay? So that's for sub-grantees. How about the providers, which could be a contractor or a vendor? They're not required to be GATA pre-approved, are not officially on record with the grant agreement. They can be listed on the proposal, on attachment A of the proposal, attachment 1, but not always. They don't necessarily have to be listed. You may not know who your Osha trainer is going to be, so they can be listed, but they don't have to necessarily be named on that document. Are compensated either by the grantee or the sub-grantee, whoever procured them and hired them. You're not required to have an MOU with them. However, again, it's recommended that agreements that confirm the services, the activities, and the payments are included there as part of that relationship. can be a for-profit, can be a nonprofit, and they also must report activities and services per the requirement of the agreement that they have with the grantee, if the grantee was the one that hired them, or the sub-grantee, if the sub-grantee was the one that hired them. So those are important highlights related to, depending on what type of partnerships you decide to go with, what the requirements will be. So now going back to your capabilities and partnership self-assessment, for those capabilities you identified potential partners, consider what type of relationship might be appropriate. And that is the last column on the assessment. It says type of partnership. Is it going to be a contractor vendor? Is it going to be the grantee, the one that's going to do that? Is it going to be a sub-grantee, the one that would do that? So take a few minutes to complete that last column, type of partnership, before we move on and talk about memos of understanding. Do we have a question in the chat?
Yes, we do. There's one from Mr. Smith, and he wants to know, do you have to include the MOU in the bid that is submitted on 10-4, or just reference to finalize it in the future?
The MOU needs to be included as part of the proposal that you submit. It needs to be included. It needs to be fully executed by whoever the parties are that are developing a partnership. So it definitely needs to be included, and it needs to be. Okay, great. So hopefully there's 1 minute left for the type of partnership, for you to complete the type of partnership column on the document and the assessment. So for those areas that you identify requiring a partnership, identify what type of partnership it would be. And that would allow you to complete the assessment with all of its columns and all of its questions. So moving on to the memorandums of understanding. An MOU is a formal agreement between two or more entities. Although they are not legally binding, they do communicate a degree of seriousness, mutual respect, and understanding regarding accountabilities. MOUs are required by the NOFO for partnerships between a grantee and a sub-grantee. Very important. Again, I'm gonna repeat it. MOUs are required by the NOFO for partnerships between a grantee and a sub-grantee. An MOU typically includes, but is not limited to, the following sections: purpose and scope, background, project or curricula program name, responsibilities under the MOU per entity, agreed upon mutual understandings, reporting requirements, record retention requirements, and effective date and signature. Those are typically the sections included in an MOU. Based on your experience with MOUs, what additional context have you found valuable on MOUs? If you have done MOUs before, is there anything else that you have found that is valuable for an MOU that you can share with our audience today? You can either share it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to share it. What the intended outcome is. Someone's saying that you can include also in the MOU what the intended outcome is. That is good. Intended outcomes are good. You could definitely include the intended outcome so that everybody is clear on what's being done and for what reasons, right? It says always follow up with an MOU. That's good. They want us to go back to the list. So I'll mention again the list of things that are typically included on the MOU. You can go back to purpose and scope, background, project or curricula program name, responsibilities under the MOU per entity, agreed upon mutual understandings, reporting requirements, record retention requirements, and effective date and signatures. We are actually going to share with you right now on the screen for you to download a couple of example MOUs that you can use for your own purposes. If you'd like a copy of it, just click on it and you'll be able to download the document. So here's one of them, and here's the second one. Just click on it, download it, save it to your desktop, and you'll be able to keep them and use them for your purposes. Customize them for your purposes. I'm going to give you a minute here to download those documents before we proceed. Great. Thank you very much, Gia. We appreciate it. Now, in terms of accountability, so it's important to know that obviously you will, you can and should consider partnerships as much as possible to address the particular needs of your program in order to have a very strong proposal. However, it's important to keep in mind that the grant recipient, the grantee, is the one who will be held ultimately accountable by both Illinois Works and DCEO. If a sub-grantee or sub-recipient or provider is not performing as agreed, they can be removed and or replaced. However, a grantee will be held accountable by DCEO. If you are the grantee, if you're the one that has this award in your name, it is your responsibility to ensure the success of this program. You are the driver in the car. You're the one leading this effort, and it's very important to keep that in mind. Please note that failure to perform can lead to being placed on the Illinois Stop Payment List. If you are placed on this list, you will not be considered as a grantee or a sub-grantee for any future funding opportunities as long as you remain on the list. So it's important to know that if the performance was not there and you are placed in the Illinois Stop Payment List, you need to work to remove yourself from that list, because otherwise you will not be able to get any more funding from the state. And when you get placed on the Illinois Stop Payment List, it's not just for DCEO, it's not just for some other agency that placed you on the list. It's actually based for all state of Illinois funding. It applies to all state of Illinois funding. So it's very important to keep that in mind. You as the grantee are the one that is responsible and will be held accountable for the requirements of the grant that you receive. To learn more about GATA pre-qualification and the Illinois Works and the Illinois Stop Payment List, please visit the website in the informational session for GATA pre-qualification. In that particular webinar, our Chief of Accountability discussed the Illinois Stop Payment List and how it works. So I encourage you to go there, listen to the recording, download the slides, so that if you have any more questions about it, you can go ahead and do that. I also want to take the time to emphasize that, as I mentioned earlier, being GATA pre-qualified is a requirement to apply for this funding opportunity. So if you're going to be the applicant, if you're going to be the organization that will be the grant recipient, you need to apply, you need to be GATA pre-qualified. We're going to provide right now in the chat the link where you can get more information about this. But at the same time, as I mentioned, we do have a recorded webinar that was done on GATA pre-qualification. It's on the landing page for the NOFO. Under informational session, you're going to be able to find more information there on becoming GATA pre-qualified. And again, listen to the recording and download the presentation, and you'll be able to get all the information there. It's very important to note that if you're not GATA pre-qualified, getting pre-qualified is a process that can take several weeks. It could go quickly, but it could also take several weeks. And the reason why that could happen is because it's not just a state process, but it also involves federal processes. So as a result, if you're not GATA pre-qualified and you want to apply for this opportunity, please get started immediately so that you are GATA pre-qualified by the time you submit your proposal. Very important. If you are not GATA pre-qualified, your application will not be considered. And I want to say that again. If you're not GATA pre-qualified, unfortunately, your application for Illinois Works funding will not be considered. Before we move on to the next section, are there any other questions or comments? If there are any questions, you can unmute yourself or submit your question via the chat. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments. We have about 25 minutes left in this webinar, a couple of sections left, so I want to make sure that if you have any other questions or comments, you could certainly submit them. I don't see any other questions or comments, Gia, do you? Are you able to discuss the GATA pre-qualified? Someone is asking, what exactly do you want to know about the GATA pre-qualification? Okay, we did not receive any other questions. Oh, here you go. How to ensure that your agency is on the right track. I would encourage you to go to the webinar, listen to the webinar, and follow the steps that were outlined there to check in the GATA portal to see if your agency is GATA pre-qualified as we speak right now. And if it's not, the portal will be able to tell you what issues need to be addressed and how to go about that. So I would encourage you to do that as soon as possible. Great. So let's move on to the next section. The next section addresses effectively managing strategic partnerships. One thing is to determine that you need strategic partnerships and even identify strategic partners. Quite a different one is to effectively manage those strategic partnerships. By the end of this section, you'll be able to list the steps for cultivating high-impact partnerships, identify barriers to developing partnerships, identify techniques for overcoming barriers for developing partnerships, and apply tips for managing partnerships. That's the focus of this section. Clearly, partnerships can support your ability to respond to each of the program elements and support your ability to achieve your program outcomes. However, it is important to acknowledge that identifying and cultivating successful partnerships require hard work by all parties, and I want to emphasize that. Partnerships require hard work by all parties. One of the key things that you will notice is barriers. So using the chat, please answer the following question. What might be some potential barriers to developing successful partnerships? As you think about partnerships right now, what might be some potential barriers that you can think of for developing successful partnerships? If you could please share in the chat, we would appreciate it. Anybody wants to share what are some potential barriers that you can think of in developing partnerships? Okay, we're very quiet related to barriers. Let's see. Allocating time and following up. That's definitely a good one. Some barriers might be having the same mission. Well, you know, that's a very good one. So there may be competition when it comes to missions. Different goals. That's very good. I mean, you may be pulling the cart in different directions, right? And if you pull the cart in different directions, you'll never get to where you want to get. Very good points. Well, through the years and doing partnerships ourselves through so many years, we have identified some key barriers that we want to share with you. Some of them already have already been mentioned by some of the participants. Lack of mutual respect. This is very important. Maybe one of the organizations is very large and the other one is small. Do they respect each other? Lack of trust and trustworthiness. I mean, this is very important. If you can't trust someone or an organization, can you actually partner with them? Can they actually partner with you if they don't trust you? Focus on money and not outcomes. This is also very important. Is this an opportunity to get just funding, or is it an opportunity to really make a difference for people's lives out there? Deceptive practices regarding joint goals. Maybe they say, yeah, I also have that goal, and we share goals, but in reality, they don't, and they have other goals in mind. Poor listening skills. Maybe they're really not listening. They're really not listening to what the needs are. Maybe they're really not listening about what the issues are. Unwillingness to acknowledge or confront issues or challenges. Some organizations or some partners or potential partners may just decide, hey, I'm just not going to deal with this. I'm going to let it go. Lack of subject matter expertise in areas that are supposed to be capabilities. This is very important. You want partners that can really complement who you are as an organization and that they have expertise and capabilities to provide services that you're not able to provide. Just bringing them on board because they'll be a good organization to work with is not a good idea if they don't have something strategic or expertise that they're providing. Competition instead of cooperation. This is another very important one. Someone mentioned it here. Yeah, I mean, you want to be able to cooperate and work together, pull the cart in the same direction and not in opposite directions. Hoarding of information. If someone is not being transparent, not giving you all the necessary information, not telling you exactly how things are going, then that's a problem. Those are barriers for successful partnerships. And then developing silos. Some people, some organizations, or some partners really want to be in their own little world, but the minute you develop a partnership, you're in the boat together, and it shouldn't be about silos. It should be about working together, right? So these are very important barriers that we have identified for developing successful partnerships. As you go about choosing partners, make sure that you really pay attention to these barriers, that you know how to address them so that you can be successful in your efforts to develop partnerships. So now, how do you overcome these barriers? Please, using the chat, what are some strategies you can employ to overcome barriers for developing successful partnerships? What are some things that you have done yourself or that you have seen out there being done to overcome barriers for these, for partnership barriers? Great. Someone mentioned good communication. That's always great and excellent for overcoming barriers. Anybody else wants to share? Anything else to overcome barriers? Figure out a way on how can assist them as well. Oh, that's good. Figure out a way on how you could be assistance to them. That's very good. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Being transparent, definitely. Transparency is always going to go a long way. If everybody knows what's going on, you could always deal with it. But if things are not transparent, it's complicated. Sharing the planning, excellent. Planning together, right? Planning on how things are going to be done, when they're going to be done, who's responsible for what. Great. Anybody else? Well, from experience, we can tell you that we've identified several techniques to prevent or overcome barriers to successful partnerships. Practice active listening. It goes to the communication that was mentioned by someone else. Practice active listening is very important. Focus on outcomes. If all the partners are really focused on the outcomes, you could really push in the same direction, right? Create a detailed MOU so that there is no questioning later on of this thing is now, you're asking me to do this and I never agreed to that. Well, create a detailed MOU from the very beginning so that there is no questioning about it. Acknowledge and confront issues or challenges right when they come up. Don't let them go by. Don't let a month go by. Acknowledge them and deal with them immediately as they come up. Freely share relevant information. There you go. Someone mentioned transparency. Yes, share information as much as possible. This is one that I have found myself to be very, very successful. Have regular planning and progress meetings so that everybody knows who's doing what, when it's being done, and you can say by next week when we meet again, this is what we need to have done. Agreeing on how the work will be done. Experience with operations manuals. If you could do a little operations manual, this is how we're going to do these things. This is how it's going to be performed and by whom. It would be very helpful. Sometimes also the grantee conducting audits of the subgrantees and also of other providers to ensure performance and reporting compliance. You could agree to an audit schedule, say, we're going to do an audit of how you're keeping your paperwork and how you're doing your services every quarter and doing that audit. Submit a progress report to be reviewed at progress meetings. Agree that every week or every 2 weeks, the participating agencies are going to submit progress reports, and those are the reports you review whenever you meet for progress meetings. All of these techniques we have found to be very effective at preventing or overcoming barriers to successful partnerships. And when it comes to Illinois Works, there are some very specific actions that you can take to preempt some of these barriers. When it comes to Illinois Works, and again, it's very important that these programs stay on track to make sure that you're successful. One of them is provide accurate and up-to-date information on reports. This is very, very important. The grantee is going to have to submit a variety of reports. And when it comes to Illinois Works, it's not only quarterly reports, but real-time reporting through our platform. And unless you have accurate information from your subgrantees, you're just not going to be able to do it. Deliver reports on time. Things need to be done in a timely manner. Deliver services on time. If you're not delivering services, there's nothing to report. So yes, reports on time, but if you're not delivering services on time, you're not going to be able to report them. Communicate concerns and issues immediately. If you are unsure at Illinois Works, there will be a staff that will be providing technical assistance and support. In fact, any grantees that are part of the network will need to participate in all the technical assistance and training Illinois Works will be doing to ensure that questions are answered and tools are provided. Utilize available resources from workforce development organizations. There's a lot of workforce development organizations and networks out there that can help you, that can provide tools for you. Utilize Illinois Works available tools. As I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of tools made available to network members, curricula and other tools that will be made available. Referrals to instructors, or if you need them, or sharing with other programs. All kinds of resources will be available to ensure your success. And something that is very, very important here, even if you're doing a great job, if your reporting doesn't reflect it, Illinois Works we will not know if you're doing a great job if you're not properly reporting. If you're properly reporting it, we'll be able to know it, DCO will know it, the state will know it, but we will not know it if you don't successfully report things to us. Do you have any questions or comments related to barriers and overcoming barriers for effective partnerships before we move on to our last section today? We have about 12 minutes left and we have just a few more items to cover. Any questions or comments before we close this session today? Okay, I don't see any questions or comments in the chat box. Do you, Gia?
Nope, no additional questions in the chat box.
Great, thank you. So moving on to our last section, available resources. By the end of this section, you'll be able to access references and resources that'll be useful for you. One thing I want to bring to your attention again is on the landing page for the NOFO, you're going to find all kinds of resources there. The NOFO materials are actually the ones that you have to use to write your proposal and submit your proposal. But all the resources that are there are extensive, and they can really help you also in having better understanding about what's needed to develop partnerships. Construction and building trades pre-apprenticeship information is there. Equity and apprenticeship information is there. There's a great report called Closing the Divide, Making Illinois a Leader in Equitable Apprenticeships is there. And then a bunch of additional resources are there for your use. And as I mentioned earlier, please go to the informational sessions section of the landing page. You'll be able to see all the technical assistance sessions we have delivered so far, data pre-qualification, introduction to Illinois Works and its programs, bidders conference, and today's TA session, developing partnerships for effective program outcomes. Those will all be there. The recordings are there, and the slides are there, and the recording and slides for this particular presentation will be there in the next 24 to 72 hours. Given the comprehensive expectations of Illinois Works related to this NOFO, it is likely that your program may be able to respond to several of the program requirements, but not all, and that's okay. This type of comprehensive approach to workforce development may require you to partner with other organizations and institutions with complementary programs and services, which together allows you to present the strongest proposal you can submit. If you want to learn more, again, please visit our website and get more information, or email us, and we'd be more than happy to respond to your questions. Email us at ceo.ilworks@illinois.gov. Again, ceo.illinoisworks@illinois.gov. I will now, unless you have any questions, let me see if there are any final questions before I hand it to you, Gia, for the evaluation. Great, I don't see any questions or any more questions or comments, so go ahead, Gia, and conduct the evaluation. Thank you.
So this will not take very long at all. So if you could, please either grab your phone or on your desktop, log into Mentometer. Your feedback is really important for us as we continue to develop programs. We need to know what we did well and what we can do to improve. So if you could, log into www.menti.com and then enter this numerical code 9433-7863. This will only take a few minutes to go through the evaluation question.
So Gia, I cannot see the slide that has that information.
Oh, okay. Let me change this. Can you see it now?
Yes. There you go.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Again, that's www.menti.com, and the code is 9433-7863. So I'm going to pause for a second to make sure everyone has a chance to log in. And again, they're just a few questions, but these are, this isn't perfunctory. We don't do an evaluation just to say we did an evaluation. We actually review all of the feedback and make adjustments accordingly to make sure that this is really the best experience we can create for all of the participants. So that's www.menti.com. I'm also going to drop it into the chat. Let's switch over to the Mentometer page. And again, here is the code at the very top, 9433-7862. 9433-7862. Okay, so let's go through the questions. The first one is, and please rate your position on this. To what extent did it meet your expectations? How likely are you to attend a similar event? And how likely are you to recommend this training? Okay, thank you for your feedback. We're going to go to the next one. The course was relevant to what I wanted to learn about this subject matter. Okay, thank you for your feedback. The next question, I plan to apply what I learned. Okay. Next question, I would recommend this course to others. Next question, and there are just a couple of open-ended questions here. What improvements might you recommend? Thank you for the comment that previous presentation issues do not exist for this one. We are certainly working on improving the overall process, so appreciate that acknowledgement. Okay. Any other feedback? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next one. What did you find effective, or if we make changes, what is it that we should absolutely keep? What about the program, if we make updates, and if we will actually be making some updates, but what should we absolutely keep? Okay, great. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. And this is the last question. Is there anything else about this course we need to know that we did not ask about? I know it takes a few extra minutes for the open-ended questions. Okay, so please feel free to continue to submit if you are in the process of providing comments here. In the meantime, I do want to turn it over to Norman, given it's 12 o'clock on the dot. So Norman?
Thank you very much, Gia. I appreciate it. Thank you for participating in the evaluation. I want to thank you again for being part of this webinar today. I hope you have found this information useful. And more importantly, I truly hope that you decide to submit a proposal to be part of the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program Network. It's been a pleasure sharing this time with you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks again.